Hello, this is Christian. In this video, we're going to look at how to pass arguments to a PHP function. Now, first, we want to talk about the difference between an argument versus a parameter, what they are. And then we'll define a function that has one parameter, a function that has multiple parameters, and how do you set default parameters in a function. These are parameters with default values. And how do you pass arguments to a function? And so let's see how they're done inside PHP. Okay, so I'm going to create another file here. I'll just call it function arguments, for lack of a better term. Okay, so the word argument versus parameters. Okay, sometimes you hear these two terms being used interchangeably to mean the same thing. Technically, they're not the same, but once you hear it, you understand what they mean. It's just when you use the term argument is in a different context versus when you use the term parameter. So when we say argument, we're talking about when you're passing data to a function. So that's called argument. When we talk about parameter, we're talking about the function definition that has parameters inside the parentheses. Okay, so I think it's easier to understand parameters first by defining a function. So let's just say that I have a function here called sum. Okay, this is a function name. Inside here, I have the function body and so on. So the parameters goes in here. Okay, this is called parameters. So it may take two arguments, right, from when you call it. So the first one could be A, and the second is B. Okay, so these are called parameters in this context when we're looking at the function definition. Okay, so these are parameters. And in here, I would just return maybe like, since it's a sum, so I'm expecting, A plus B, right? That's the meaning of a sum function, right? Be meaningful. Okay, so that is a parameter. Argument is when you call this function. If I call it, let's just say that I have a total here equals sum, and I pass in the numbers to this function. These are called arguments. So if I pass in 2 and 4, okay, so 2 and 4 are the arguments. Okay, so that is the major or the main distinction between the two. But you hear, developers and other coders or people talk about that to mean the same thing. But that's what it means. Okay, so if I save this and I print this out, then I'm going to expect to get just the total, right? So click that, go to terminal, and go to module, and run this file called function variable arguments, and I get 6 just as expected. Okay, so this is how you pass arguments to a function. Okay, arguments. And this is how a function takes two parameters. Okay, what about if I do something like this? If I only offer this, do the first one and don't include the second one, what's going to happen then? Okay, so if I do that, if I run this code again, you'll see that I have an error because now it says line 12. Okay, line 12 has exactly 2 expected, but I only have 1. Okay, it's too few arguments to function sum, 1 passed in and expecting exactly 2. Okay, so this one here has a problem. Just like any other function, right, you have to supply the correct number of arguments to match the number of parameters here in that order. Sometimes orders are not important, but most of the times the order is really important. Had I, have this like doing a subtraction, then you will get a different result. Or I do a division, then you get a different result. But for addition and multiplication, it doesn't really matter, right? Okay, so now to make this work, you can do one of two things. One is, always supply 2. If you don't do that, then you have to set the second parameter as a default parameter. Okay, so a default parameter is when you declare a parameter in the function head here, you assign that as a default value. So now you see that B is assigned the number 0. So if I don't supply the second parameter or argument here, it will still work. And it'll be just 2 plus 0, I get 2 back. So if I save this and clear my console and run it again, you see that it returns 2 because b has been set to 0. So it looks for the second parameter that is none, and it will just take this default value called 0. And this value can be anything you want. I just put 0 here. It could have been 10, right? Or 1 or 10. Doesn't matter. If I do that, then it will use 10, and I'll get 20 instead of, I get 12 instead of 2. Okay? So this is the default value. Now it doesn't work the other way around. If, I can't put here. I can. It doesn't matter, right? I can put 2 there or maybe 20 there. Okay. If I do that, then notice both have default values, so they are both default parameters. But I only supply the first one. I did not supply the second one. So that means this number, whatever I supply to this function, I pass to will take precedence. It will override whatever the default value is here. So instead of 20, it will still be 2. So if I save this and run this code down here, I should still get 12 just like I had earlier. Okay, so now if I don't supply anything at all, like this, right, no parameters, then I'm expected to get 20. I mean, at 30, right? So as you can see, I get 30 because I did not supply any values to this function. And this only works if you have default parameters. Okay, if they're not default to anything like that, this doesn't work. It would again yell at you, has an error there. Okay, and also if you do this, let's say you only do the first one and the second is not a default parameter. Now if you did earlier, if I do like a 1 is 2, I pass 2 parameters, I'm gonna get 1 plus 2 is 3, right? Because it's gonna override whatever I have here. So again, if I run this code, I get a 3 down here. Okay, so if I go back to the original one, and if I don't pass the second one again, like this, okay, if I save this and clear my console, if I run it, now you see that I have the same error again. So back to square one. So that means that I can set the default for A, but still, this I did not pass any value to it. So I still need to pass the second parameter. Okay, so in this case. So if you want to guarantee to work, both of them should be default parameters. Or if you only require the first one, then the second must always be set to a default value in order for it to work. Okay, so that is how you declare a function with, I would do like a function with 2 parameters. So one parameter is just basically you just provide 1. Okay, if it's just 1, then you cannot pass 2 parameters to it. If you do, it's gonna fail, right? So that is pretty much the same thing as saying 1 plus, let's just say default is, if I put here, b is 10, and then I put 10 here. I mean b here, right? So now I only pass 1 parameter. In this case, no problem, because that's all it takes, just 1 parameter. And you'll see that it returns 11 because I pass 1 to it, overrides 20, and then b is 10 internally, and the a is 1 plus 11 plus 10, I get 11. Okay, this is for passing 1 argument to a function. And same thing as before, if I provide no arguments, then I'm still going to get a solution which is going to be 30, because 20 plus 10 is 30, right? Okay, so that's how you pass functions, arguments to a function, and also how parameters work inside a function. And this is also how you set parameter or default parameters in a function.